My brother left me out of the family photo. Then the fire chief walked in and said, "Captain, we need you." My brother handed me his phone and said, "Clara, take the picture." Everyone gathered in front of the fireplace. My father, my brother, his wife, their kids, my aunt, my cousins, even the neighbors who were not blood, but somehow still made it into the frame. The whole family, except me. My niece Sophie frowned and looked around the room. "Wait," she said. "Aunt Clara isn't in it." My brother laughed like she had said something cute. "She's taking it, sweetheart." Then he looked straight at me and added, "Besides, the Christmas card is for people who actually show up." The room went quiet for half a second. Not long enough for anyone to defend me, just long enough for everyone to hear it. Then Melissa, my sister-in-law, fixed her hair and said, "Can we take it again? Clara, make sure you get the fireplace sign in the background." The sign said, "Built on Family Values." Grant had bought it for his remodeling company's holiday campaign. He wanted the photo for his business page. His perfect house, his perfect wife, his perfect kids, his perfect father, his perfect family story. Apparently, I was family enough to hold the camera, but not family enough to be remembered. I took the picture 3 times. Then my brother checked the screen, smiled, and said, "Perfect. Finally looks like the family is all together." That was when the small black radio inside my coat pocket vibrated. Once, then again, sharp, urgent, the kind of alert I had trained myself never to ignore. But I stayed still, because at that moment, standing behind the camera in my brother's warm suburban living room, nobody knew who I really was. They thought I was the disappointing one, the one who left, the one without a husband, without a house, without a title they could brag about at dinner. They thought my life was small because it did not photograph well. And before the night was over, my brother would say exactly that in front of everyone. He would call me wasted potential. He would tell his children I was proof of what happened when a person never built anything real. Then 20 minutes later, 2 fire trucks and a sheriff's SUV would pull into his quiet Ohio cul-de-sac. A fire chief would step onto his porch in the freezing rain, and he would not ask for Grant. He would ask for me. "Captain Whitaker," he would say, while my entire family stood behind me in silence. "We need you now." My name is Clara Whitaker, and for most of my life, my family mistook my quietness for failure. I arrived at Grant's house a little after 6, just as the winter sky turned gray and heavy over Dayton. Freezing rain tapped against my windshield while I sat in the driveway staring at the house my brother loved showing off. It was beautiful in a very Grant way. Brick front, white columns, 2 wreaths on the double doors, warm lights in every window. A yard so neat, it looked like even the leaves had been trained to fall politely. On the front lawn, he had planted a temporary sign for his remodeling company, Grant Whitaker Kitchens, built on family values. I stared at that sign longer than I meant to. Family values. That was Grant's favorite phrase lately. He used it in ads. He used it in speeches at church. He used it when he talked about his business. He used it whenever he wanted people to see him as a good husband, a good father, a good son, a good man. But family values in Grant's world had always depended on who made him look good. I turned off the truck and sat in the silence. In the passenger seat was my emergency duffel bag. Black, scuffed, heavy. Grant had once called it my doomsday purse. Inside were gloves, flashlights, battery packs, first aid supplies, dry socks, a reflective vest, protein bars, a hand crank radio, and a red flashlight my mother had given me years ago. I almost left the bag in the truck. Then I heard my mother's voice in my memory. "Better to have it and not need it, baby." So I took it. Melissa opened the door before I even knocked twice. Her smile was bright, pretty, and already tired of me. "Clara, you made it." Not "I'm glad you came." Not "It's good to see you." You made it. As if my arrival had been a mild inconvenience that finally resolved itself. "Hi, Melissa." She hugged me with one arm, careful not to press her sweater against my wet coat. "Oh, you're soaked. Weather is awful, isn't it?" "It's getting worse." "Well, come in. Everyone's here." Of course they were. Everyone was always here before me, even when I had driven 3 hours through freezing rain. Grant appeared behind her with a glass of bourbon in his hand. Look who found her way back to civilization. I smiled faintly. Happy birthday to Dad. Grant stepped aside. Careful with that bag. Don't scratch the floor. We just had the entryway redone. That was Grant. Always joking. Always smiling. Always making sure the joke reminded you where you stood. Inside the house smelled like roast chicken, buttered rolls, cinnamon candles, and money spent carefully enough to look effortless. My father sat in the living room beside Aunt Diane. He looked smaller than the last time I had seen him, though he still wore the same navy cardigan he wore to every family event. He stood when he saw me. Clara. Hi, Dad. I hugged him. He patted my back twice, then pulled away. I wasn't sure you'd make it. There it was again. That quiet little expectation that I would not show up. I said I would. He looked uncomfortable, as if my answer had carried more truth than he wanted. Before he could respond, Sophie ran in from the hallway. Aunt Clara. She threw herself into my arms. I hugged her hard. She was 12 now, all elbows and freckles and big, serious eyes. The last time I had seen her, she still had braces. Now she looked like a person trying to grow up faster than the adults around her deserved. You got taller, I said. You always say that, because you always do it. She laughed, then noticed the black duffel bag in my hand. Is that your emergency bag? Grant chuckled behind me. Your aunt brings that thing everywhere. Birthday dinners, grocery stores, probably movie theaters. Sophie looked at him. So, Grant blinked. Melissa quickly said, Sophie, sweetheart, go help Tyler set out the board games. Sophie rolled her eyes but obeyed. The dining room table was already set. White plates, gold napkin rings, tall candles, place cards in Melissa's careful handwriting. Dad, Grant, Melissa, Tyler, Sophie, Aunt Diane, Rob, Janet, Paul, Linda. I looked once, then again. My name was not there. Melissa followed my eyes. Oh, Clara. I hope you don't mind, she said, lowering her voice into that soft tone people use when they want cruelty to sound like organization. We weren't sure if you'd actually make it because of the weather, so we didn't want to rearrange the whole table. Grant added from behind her. You're flexible. That's your thing. By the sliding glass door, a folding card table had been set with one plate, one paper napkin, and a mismatched chair. A laundry basket had been pushed underneath it. So had the dog bed. Melissa gave me an apologetic smile that did not reach her eyes. You're easygoing, right? Easygoing. That was the word people used when they had already decided your discomfort did not matter. Before I could answer, Sophie returned and saw where I was supposed to sit. Why is Aunt Clara over there? Melissa sighed. Honey, we talked about this. No, we didn't. Grant's voice sharpened. Sophie. She crossed her arms. But she's family. The room went still. My father looked at his lap. Aunt Diane suddenly became fascinated by her wine glass. Melissa's smile tightened. Of course she is. It's just seating. Just seating. Just a photo. Just a joke. Just dinner. Families can bury a person under the word just. I sat at the card table because I had spent too many years proving I could survive disrespect. Dinner moved forward with all the sounds of a normal American family pretending it was healthy. Forks scraping plates. People talking over each other. Tyler complaining about basketball tryouts. Aunt Diane discussing her knee surgery. Melissa telling everyone about the nightmare of finding the right tile for the powder room. Grant talked about his newest client, a dentist, who wanted a farmhouse kitchen with authentic rustic charm, which apparently cost more than my truck. Every conversation circled back to Grant. His business, his house, his plans, his latest ad campaign, his values. At one point, Paul from next door lifted his glass and said, Grant, that family values branding is smart. People trust a family man. Grant smiled proudly. That's the whole point. People want to hire someone stable, someone rooted. Then he looked over at me. Just for a second. Long enough. Melissa asked me how things were down there. Down there meant the mountain county where I lived near the Kentucky border. 3 hours away from Grant's perfect street. A world of gravel roads, volunteer fire stations, church basements, flood sirens, and people who knew how to check on their neighbors without making a speech about it. Busy, I said. Grant leaned back. Busy doing what exactly these days? The table quieted in that familiar way. Not because they were interested, because they were waiting for him to make me small. County emergency management, I said. Shelter coordination. Fire department support. Winter response planning. Some rescue logistics. Melissa blinked politely. So, community volunteering. Some of it is volunteer. Some is county work. Grant lifted his glass. In other words, Clara is still handing out blankets. A few people laughed. Not loudly, but enough. I looked at him. Sometimes blankets keep people alive. His smile thinned. Sure, I didn't say they didn't. But his tone said he had said exactly that. Dad cleared his throat not to defend me but to change the subject. So Tyler, how's basketball? And just like that, I disappeared again. After dinner, Melissa brought out Dad's birthday cake. Chocolate, his favorite. Everyone sang. Dad smiled, eyes shining under the candles. For a moment, I softened. Grief does that. It sneaks tenderness into places where anger had been sitting comfortably. Grant stood at the head of the table and gave a speech. He talked about legacy, hard work, family, showing up. He said Dad had taught him that a man's name meant something, that a family was built by people who stayed sacrificed and made something solid, showing up. That phrase hit me in the chest. Grant had missed 3 of Mom's last 5 doctor appointments. He had missed the night her fever spiked so high I sat on the bathroom floor and cried while waiting for the nurse to call back. He had missed the morning hospice told me the breathing change meant the end was close. He had missed the final hour. But there he stood under warm lights talking about sacrifice. And everyone let him. After cake, Grant clapped his hands. Family photo before everyone looks tired. That was when he handed me his phone. The whole family gathered in front of the fireplace. Behind them, the wooden sign read, "Built on family values." Sophie noticed immediately. Wait, Aunt Clara isn't in it. Grant smiled without looking at me. She's taking it, sweetheart. But then she's not in the family picture. Melissa laughed softly. Oh, honey. Aunt Clara doesn't like attention. I looked at her. That was new. Now I had apparently chosen my own erasure. Grant added, "Besides, the Christmas card is for people who actually show up." The words landed cleanly. No one could pretend they misunderstood. My father's jaw tightened. For 1 second, I thought he might finally say something. Instead, he looked at me and murmured, "Clara, please. It's my birthday. Don't turn this into a fight." I stared at him. I had not said a word. I had not ruined anything. I had only stood outside the frame they built without me. But somehow peace was still my responsibility. I lifted the phone. "Smile," I said. They did. After the photo, Grant checked it and grinned. Perfect. Finally looks like the family is all together. Something inside me went quiet. Not numb. Quiet. There is a difference. Numb means pain has shut you down. Quiet means pain has finally stopped controlling you. I handed him the phone. Then I walked to the mantel. There were photos everywhere. Grant and Melissa's wedding. Tyler's first baseball game. Sophie at her school play. Dad holding a fish. Mom on Christmas morning laughing in a red scarf. My throat tightened. I remembered that Christmas. I had made the cinnamon rolls. I had taken that picture. Mom had been too weak to stand for long, so I had arranged pillows behind her back and wrapped the scarf around her shoulders because she was cold. Grant had posted the photo that afternoon with the caption, "Mom still runs Christmas around here," but he had not shown the part where I was kneeling beside her tying her slipper because her hands were shaking. That part did not fit the story. Sophie appeared beside me. "Why aren't you in any pictures?" I swallowed. I guess I'm usually the one taking them. She studied the mantel. "That's not fair." "No," I said softly. "It's not." She looked up at me. "When I have my own house, I'm putting pictures of everybody, even the people holding the camera." That nearly broke me. Not Grant's insult, not Melissa's smile, not the card table. A child understanding my absence almost brought me to tears. Before I could answer, Melissa called from the kitchen. "Sophie, come help me." Sophie did not move. Melissa's voice sharpened. Now, the night got worse after the wine. It always did. People became warmer with each other and colder with the truth. Aunt Diane started talking about Mom. At first, it was gentle. Then it became a version of history I did not recognize. She said Mom had been strong right to the end. She said the family had pulled together. She said Grant had carried a lot. Grant lowered his head, accepting sympathy, like a man who had earned it. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. Mom's final months had not looked like a family pulling together. They had looked like me sleeping in the recliner beside her hospital bed, me changing sheets at 2 a.m, me crushing pills into applesauce because she could not swallow, me helping her to the bathroom when she was too embarrassed to ask Dad, me calling nurses, me washing her hair in the sink, me holding her hand at 4:12 a.m. when she whispered, "Don't let them make you small, baby." Grant had visited on Sundays. Sometimes, usually for less than an hour, usually long enough to kiss her forehead, ask if she needed anything, and leave before the hard parts began. But nobody wanted that version. That version carried too much guilt. Grant looked at me across the room. "You know Mom worried about Clara the most." The air shifted. Melissa put her hand on his arm. "Grant." But she did not stop him. He gave the room a sad smile. "I mean it with love." That was how Grant sharpened a knife. With love. He looked at Sophie and Tyler, then back at me. She had so much potential. Everyone knew it. Smartest one in the house. But potential doesn't mean anything if you never do something with it. My father shifted. "Grant, maybe not tonight. Not stop. Not that's cruel. Maybe not tonight." As if the only problem was timing, Grant continued. "I'm saying this because there are kids in the room. They need to understand choices. You either build something solid, or you drift." He turned fully toward me. And Clara drifted. The room went silent. My face stayed still. Inside, I felt the old wound open with frightening ease. Grant was not finished. He never was when he had an audience. "I'm not saying she's a bad person," he said. "She's kind. She means well. But every family has someone who teaches the next generation what happens when you waste your gifts." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Tyler stared at the floor. Aunt Diane whispered, "That's enough." But again, whispering is not protection. Grant leaned back, satisfied with himself. There. Somebody had to say it. My coat pocket vibrated. Once. Then again. I stood slowly. Grant laughed under his breath. "And there she goes." I reached for my coat. Melissa said, "Clara, please don't make this dramatic." Dad looked at me with tired eyes. "Can we just have one peaceful birthday?" That one almost made me laugh. Peaceful. In my family, peaceful meant everyone surviving Grant as quietly as possible. I pulled the black radio from my pocket. The screen glowed red. Red shelter activation. Oak Run Senior Apartments. Power failure. Evacuation support needed. Second request. I checked my phone. No signal. The freezing rain must have taken down a tower. Grant saw the radio and smirked. "What is that, Clara?" "Your blanket hotline." That was when the radio crackled. A broken voice came through the speaker. "Whitaker, if you receive, respond. Oak Run evacuation in progress. Grace Fellowship not ready. We need lead support. Repeat, we need Captain Whitaker." The room died, not quieted. Died. Captain, not Clara, not Claire, not the drifter, not the warning story. Captain Whitaker. I pressed the side button. Whitaker receiving. "I'm in Dayton near Miller Ridge. Phone signal down. Give me status." Static answered first. Then a man's voice came through, strained with relief. "Captain." "Thank God. 68 residents. 9 oxygen dependent. Buses delayed. Church generator unstable. Shelter lead injured. Volunteers waiting on instruction. Chief Morales is en route to your location." I answered calmly. "Tell Morales I need my bag and I'll be ready in 2 minutes." "Copy that." The radio went silent. Nobody moved. Grant stared at me like I had spoken a language he did not know existed. Melissa's face had gone pale. Aunt Diane whispered, "Thay." My father's hand slowly lowered from his coffee cup. I put on my coat. Grant's voice came out smaller than before. "What does that mean?" "It means people are cold," I said, "and scared. And they need help." Red and white lights swept across the front windows. Sophie ran to the door. "There's a fire truck outside." Grant moved first, probably because it was his house, and he needed to feel in charge of something. He opened the door. Freezing rain blew into the hallway. A fire engine sat angled at the curb lights. flashing silently over perfect lawns and holiday wreaths. Behind it was a sheriff's SUV and a smaller rescue truck with mud frozen along the tires. A man in a navy jacket stepped onto the porch, gray mustache, helmet under one arm, rein on his shoulders. His eyes went straight to me. Captain Whitaker. He did not ask for Grant. He did not look impressed by the house. He did not care about the fireplace sign, the expensive kitchen, the Christmas card, or the family photo I had been excluded from. He came for me. "Sorry to come to the door," Chief Morales said. "Radio is spotty and phones are overloaded. We need you at Grace Fellowship." I grabbed my duffel. What happened to the shelter lead? Slipped on ice unloading cots? Broken wrist? Ambulance took her 10 minutes ago. Generator. Unstable. Kitchen open. Pastor has keys, but he's overwhelmed. Volunteers. Too many and no one directing them. I nodded. "Let's go." Grant stepped forward. "Wait. You're saying Clara is in charge of this?" Chief Morales looked at him, confused by the question. "She's the best shelter coordinator in 3 counties. The words hit the hallway harder than the storm. Aunt Diane sat down on the bottom step. Melissa looked toward the living room mantel, toward all the photos where I did not exist. My father covered his mouth with one hand. Grant tried to speak, but no sound came out. Chief Morales looked from him to me, then seemed to understand more than anyone had told him. His expression cooled. "Your sister has missed birthdays, holidays, and Christmas mornings because people needed her," he said. "So if she wasn't here, it was usually because she was somewhere that mattered." No one breathed. That sentence walked straight across the room and stood in front of Grant. Because all night he had accused me of not showing up. Now a man in a rain-soaked fire jacket had said the truth in the doorway of Grant's perfect house. I stepped onto the porch. Sophie ran after me. "Aunt Clara." I turned. Her eyes were wet. "Are you going to help those people?" "Yes." "Are they scared?" "Probably. But you know what to do." I looked at her and smiled softly. "Yes, sweetheart. I know what to do." She hugged me hard. Then she whispered, "I knew you weren't nothing." I closed my eyes for 1 second. When I opened them, Grant was looking at the floor. I kissed the top of Sophie's head. "Don't let anyone teach you that kindness is small." Then I walked into the rain. The ride to Grace Fellowship Church took 11 minutes. Chief Morales drove with both hands on the wheel while the wipers fought the freezing rain. "You okay?" he asked. I stared out at the dark streets. "Number." He nodded. That was the thing about emergency people. They knew when not to demand a story in the middle of a storm. Grace Fellowship looked like every small-town American church that had survived decades of weddings, funerals, pancake breakfasts, youth group lock-ins, and whispered prayers. Red brick, white steeple, faded sign, basement kitchen, folding chairs. Tonight the parking lot was chaos. 2 buses idled near the entrance. Volunteers carried blankets, walkers, oxygen tanks, grocery bags, and cardboard boxes. Elderly residents sat inside the buses with fear written across their faces. A woman in scrubs was crying near the steps. A teenage boy stood frozen with a case of bottled water in his arms. The moment my boots hit the pavement, I stopped being the woman at Grant's folding table. I became Captain Whitaker. I pointed to the nearest volunteers. "You two clear a walkway from the buses to the fellowship hall. No bags in the middle. People will trip." They moved immediately. I turned to the woman in scrubs. "What's your name?" "Angie." "Angie, look at me. You are not failing. You're tired. There's a difference." Her crying slowed. "How many oxygen-dependent residents?" 9. Maybe 10. "Mr. Calloway fights his tank, but he needs it when he sleeps." "Good. You know them. Stay with me. You're my memory tonight." She nodded. I turned to the volunteers. Oxygen-dependent residents near the west wall. Fall risk residents where we can see them. Coffee and warm water in the kitchen. If you don't have a job, come to me, and I'll give you one. Chaos did not disappear. It changed shape. That is what people misunderstand about emergencies. You do not make fear vanish. You give it direction. Within minutes, the room began to breathe. Cots opened. Blankets stacked. Coffee brewed. The pastor stopped panicking once I put a clipboard in his hands and gave him one simple task. A retired nurse named Mrs. Alvarez took charge of blood pressure checks like God himself had assigned her. People began to settle, not because everything was fixed, because somebody calm was standing in the middle of it. About 40 minutes later, I looked up and saw my family standing near the church entrance. Grant, Melissa, Dad, Aunt Diane, Tyler, Sophie. They were wet, awkward, and unsure. Dad held a box of old blankets. Melissa carried grocery bags full of snacks. Tyler had phone chargers tangled around one arm. Sophie clutched my red emergency flashlight. Grant stood behind them without his smirk. For a second, anger rose in me. Then Sophie lifted the flashlight. We brought stuff. I looked at the supplies, then at their faces. Blankets on the stage, water and snacks by the kitchen, chargers near the outlet table. Tyler tape cords down so nobody trips. Sophie, stay with Mrs. Alvarez and ask before touching anything medical. Yes, ma'am, Tyler said immediately. Grant looked at his son like he had never heard that tone from him before. They followed my instructions. No jokes, no comments. No one called it handing out blankets now. An old man in a brown cardigan grabbed my sleeve as I passed. Clara. I turned. Mr. Calloway. You behaving. Number. I figured. His wife smiled up at the woman beside her. This is the one I told you about. During the flood, she came through the water with my medicine in a plastic bread bag. It was knee-deep, I corrected. Mrs. Calloway waved me off. To you. You have long legs. Grant heard every word. He froze with a blanket in his hands. Then a little boy in dinosaur pajamas ran straight into me. Captain Clara. He wrapped both arms around my waist. His mother hurried after him. Mason Honey let her work. It's okay, I said, touching his back. You helping tonight? He nodded seriously. Mom said we lost power, but I wasn't scared because you always know what to do. Across the room, my father sat down hard on a folding chair, not because he was tired, because he was finally seeing the life I had been living, the life he had allowed my brother to mock. For the next 2 hours, my family became part of the work. Not the center, not special, just useful. And I think that humbled them more than any speech could have. Melissa handed out granola bars to seniors who thanked her like she had done something sacred. Tyler taped down cords. Sophie helped Mrs. Alvarez pass out paper cups. Aunt Diane sat beside a confused woman and answered the same question about her cat again and again without losing patience. Grant carried cots. At first he did it like a man trying to prove something. Then he realized nobody cared how strong he looked. They cared whether the cots were safe. At one point, Paul and Linda from next door arrived too. Apparently, Sophie had called them and told them the church needed blankets. Paul looked at Grant, then at me. Grant, you didn't tell us your sister was this Clara. Grant frowned. What does that mean? Paul pointed toward a bulletin board near the kitchen. Pinned there was a faded newspaper clipping from the flood 2 years earlier. A photo showed me standing knee-deep in brown water beside 2 firefighters and an elderly woman wrapped in a blanket. The headline read, Local Response Team helps evacuate 114 residents during flooding. My name was in the caption. Captain Clara Whitaker. Paul shook his head. Our church group donated after that flood. Everyone was talking about her for weeks. He turned to Grant with a small laugh. You must be proud. Grant looked at the clipping, then at me, then down at the cot in his hands. He had spent the night telling people I had built nothing real. Now he was standing in a church shelter under a photo of me helping people survive. There was no argument left for him. Around midnight, the storm softened. The generator held. Most of the residents were warm. The buses were empty. I stood near the kitchen drinking terrible church coffee from a styrofoam cup. My hair smelled like rain and diesel. My boots were muddy. My hands ached. And I felt more at home there than I had in my brother's perfect dining room. Dad walked over slowly. His voice was rough. I didn't know. I kept my eyes on the room. You didn't ask. He flinched. I did not say it to punish him. I said it because truth deserves plain language. He sat beside me on the low windowsill. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, Your mother knew. Yes. His eyes filled. She used to ask about your training weekends, he said. I thought she was just making conversation. She knew what they meant. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small red flashlight Sophie had been holding. The paint was scratched. The rubber button was worn smooth. Mom gave me this after the first winter storm I worked, I said. She told me not every light had to be big to matter. Dad covered his face with one hand. For years I had imagined this moment. My father finally understanding. My brother finally ashamed. My family finally seeing me. In my imagination, I always had the perfect line. Something sharp. Something dramatic. Something that would make them feel every lonely night they had handed me. But real life is not a movie. Real life gives you an old man under church lights, ashamed and tired, with a box of donated blankets at his feet. Real life makes revenge feel smaller than grief. Grant approached a few minutes later. His expensive sweater was gone. His dress shirt was wrinkled. His hair had lost its perfect shape. For once, he looked like a person instead of an advertisement for success. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We are talking." He glanced around. "I mean privately. Number." That stopped him. I was done letting people wound me in public and apologize in corners. Grant looked down. Then he nodded. "I was wrong. I waited." He swallowed. "I thought you were wasting your life." "I know. I thought you left because you couldn't handle family." "I know." His voice tightened. "And tonight what I said, you said what you believed." That landed hard, because it was true. Aunt Diane, standing nearby with a stack of cups, went still. Melissa looked down at the floor. Grant rubbed his forehead. "I don't know why I needed to say it like that." "Yes, you do." His eyes lifted. I kept my voice calm. "You needed me to be small. You needed one person in the family standing below you so your life looked taller." His face reddened, but he did not argue. That mattered. Maybe not enough, but it mattered. "I was jealous," he said finally. I had known it for years. Still hearing him say it out loud changed the air. "Mom saw you," he said. "Even when you were exhausted. Even when you had nothing to show for it. She saw you. And I hated that." My throat tightened. There it was. The ugly little root under all those jokes. He had not mocked me because I was nothing. He had mocked me because someone he loved had known I was more. "That doesn't erase what you did," I said. "I know. You humiliated me in front of your children." "I know. You taught Sophie and Tyler that disrespect can be dressed up as honesty." His eyes moved toward his daughter. Sophie was sitting beside Mrs. Calloway, carefully placing crackers on napkins. Grant's voice broke. "I'll fix that." "You don't fix it with one apology," I said. "You fix it by never doing it again." He nodded. "No comeback. No defense. Just shame." Melissa stepped forward. "I'm sorry about the seat," she said. It sounded small after everything else, but small cruelties matter. People use them to show you where they think you belong. The card table, she continued. The photo. The mantle. I told myself you didn't care because you were private. I looked at her. I cared. She started crying. "I know that now." "No," I said softly. "You know it because other people made it impossible not to know. That's different." She lowered her eyes. I took a slow breath. "I don't need to be the center of this family. I never did. But I will not be treated like extra furniture anymore." No one spoke. For once, silence did not feel like dismissal. It felt like people finally understanding the weight of what they had allowed. Then Sophie walked over, holding Grant's phone. Her face was serious. "Dad." Grant turned. "What is it?" She held up the screen. The family photo was already posted on his business page. The caption read, "Nothing matters more than family. Built on family values at work and at home." Sophie looked at him with wet eyes. "Why did you post that after leaving Aunt Clara out?" Grant's face drained. Melissa covered her mouth. Aunt Diane whispered, "Oh, Grant." The post had comments already. "Beautiful family. Love this. Family is everything." Then Paul, who had apparently seen what happened at the shelter, had commented, "You should add your sister Captain Clara Whitaker. She's the reason half this county is sleeping somewhere warm tonight." Under that, someone else wrote, "Captain Clara helped my mother during the flood. She has family values." Then another, "That woman saved my dad's life last winter. Put her in the picture." Grant stared at the screen. For a man who cared so much about image, there was no punishment sharper than the truth appearing under his own caption. He did not lose money. He did not lose his house. He did not get sued. Nothing dramatic happened. He simply got exposed in the exact place where he had tried to look perfect. And the worst part was that no one had lied. Sophie handed him the phone. "You should delete it," she said. Grant nodded slowly. "No," I said. Everyone looked at me. I took one step closer. "Don't delete it because you're embarrassed. Edit it because you understand." Grant looked at the screen, then at me. His fingers moved slowly. A moment later, he showed me the new caption. "Tonight I learned that family values do not mean much if you leave someone out because their life does not make you look good. My sister Clara has spent years serving people quietly while I misunderstood her. I was wrong." He hesitated. "Is that okay?" I looked at him. "Number." His face fell. "It's too clean," I said. "You still sound like you're giving a speech." He swallowed. Then he deleted the last line and typed again. This time the caption ended. "I was wrong. I hurt her. And I am sorry." That was better. Not enough, but better. Outside, the storm softened. Inside, the church hummed with tired life. Someone laughed near the coffee table. A child coughed. A volunteer dropped a stack of cups. Mrs. Alvarez told Mr. Calloway to put his oxygen back on, or she would personally haunt him. Life kept going, even while old family stories broke open. That is what dignity really is. People think dignity is a dramatic speech, a slam door, a perfect revenge line, a room full of people gasping when the truth comes out. But sometimes dignity is standing in a church kitchen at midnight soaked from the rain, telling the truth without begging anyone to believe it. Dad stood. His voice shook. "Clara, your mother would be proud of you." I looked at him. She was. He nodded, accepting the correction. Then he said, "I am too." I wanted those words. I hated that I wanted them. I hated that a grown woman could still feel like a daughter waiting to be seen. But I also knew something important. I did not need those words to become true. They were late. They were not useless, but they were late. So I let them land without chasing them. "Thank you," I said. Near sunrise, the power at Oak Run came back in one wing. Buses were arranged. Residents began leaving in small groups. Volunteers folded blankets and swept the floor. My family looked exhausted, not miserable, changed. There is a difference. Grant stood by the church doors with Melissa and the kids. He did not ask me to come back to the house. He did not pretend one night had fixed everything. He simply said, "I told Sophie and Tyler the truth this morning." I waited. "I told them you were the one who took care of Mom," he said. "I told them I was wrong to make your life sound small. I told them success isn't only what people can photograph." Sophie stepped forward, and I told Dad the Christmas card is canceled. Grant looked at her. She shrugged. "You can't mail a picture called family when Aunt Clara isn't in it." For the first time all night I laughed. Grant almost smiled, then thought better of it. Melissa wiped her eyes. Dad hugged me before they left. A real hug. Not quick. Not distracted. "I want to know about your life," he said. "Then ask me when you're ready to listen." "I'm ready." "I hope so." Grant looked toward me one last time. "I'm sorry, Clara." This time it did not sound like a man trying to escape guilt. It sounded like a brother standing inside it. I nodded. "I hear you." That was all I could give. And for that morning, it was enough. After they left, I stayed behind. There were blankets to fold, forms to collect, rides to arrange, and one stubborn Mr. Calloway to convince that oxygen was not optional. Life did not pause for my family's regret. That was another lesson. People may finally see you, but your purpose cannot depend on their eyes. Around noon, I drove back toward the mountains. The rain had stopped. The fields along the highway were gray and quiet. My red flashlight sat in the cup holder beside me, scratched and still working. My phone buzzed at a gas station. A message from Melissa. Sophie picked a photo for the mantle. "Only if you approve." Then one from Dad. "I'm sorry I let silence do damage." Then Grant. "I know respect should not have needed sirens. I'll prove I understand that." I read the messages while my coffee cooled. For once, I did not rush to answer. Instead, I looked out at the highway leading back to my little rented duplex behind the fire station. A place with muddy boots by the door. A pantry full of batteries and bottled water. A radio that sometimes woke me in the middle of the night. A life my family had called small because they had never been brave enough to understand it. Finally, I typed one message to the family group chat. I'm glad you're ready to see me. But I need you to understand something. I was never the family warning story. I was never wasted potential. I was never the empty chair at the edge of the room. I was building a life you didn't respect because it didn't look impressive at your table. Respect cannot arrive only after sirens. It has to be there before the emergency. It has to be there in the seat you save, the photo you include, the story you tell when the person is standing right in front of you. I hit send. Then I put the truck in drive and headed home. Because dignity is not about making people clap for you. It is not about shocking them into silence. It is not even about finally getting the apology you deserved years ago. Dignity is knowing who you are before anyone else is forced to admit it. And family. Family is not the people who leave you out of the picture until the world proves you belong. Family is the people who make room for you before the fire truck ever pulls up. So tell me honestly, if you were Clara, would you go back to that family table? Or would you wait until they proved there was finally a real seat for you